Well, hello and welcome back to this restoration series on this Aldo Velani Barolo pipe. And if you watch the intro video, we're going to have a lot of work to do on the stem, not a lot to do on the stem. So I'm going to set the stem aside for now, and we will come back to that later. So for the stem, the first thing I want to do is get that inside cleaned out and then start to figure out just how much briar we're going to have to remove here in order to deal with the burnout. So to do that, we're going to use our standard reaming procedures, and I'm going to start with the Castleford. And this is actually there's not a lot of cake in here, so it's not going to be hard to get this reamed out. This pipe doesn't appear to have been heavily smoked, which if you watch the intro video that I did on it, that might explain why there was my supposition about the cause of the burnout might explain why it was not heavily smoked, and that is that the burnout was caused by a flaw that was introduced to the briar by a drill, and while it was being made. So in other words, it just didn't have time to get smoked very much before it would have burned out. It seems like there's some cake in the bottom that I'm not getting at because of the shape of these. They're parabolic, and the bottom of this is a bit conical. So I'll switch over to the senior reamer and let it do its job. There's really not, yeah, we're pretty well down there now. Not a great deal of cake was in there, just needed to be cleaned out a bit. Alright, so it looks like, it's interesting, there's an area down there that's very light colored. Like I'll put my finger over the burnout so you're not being fooled by any light showing through on the bottom. And you can see that's much lighter colored. So I want to get down in there and see what exactly that is. That may be burnout, in which case this is actually going to be a fairly extensive part of the bottom of the pipe here that's going to need to be dealt with. Alright, so that's where we are with the reaming. So that is done. The next step is going to be, I want to clean up the outside, because I don't know how much of this is stain and how much is dirt, and I'm probably going to wind up removing the stain with some acetone just to have a cleaner surface to work with and see if I can better figure this out. As I put my finger down in there, this does feel like, yeah, this is actually it's a bigger burnout than it appears to be. So there's the part that burned through, which is kind of at the very tip, but it's also an area, let me get an area something like this that's burned. So I'm probably going to have to do a fairly large plug on this. Just poke in there a bit. Huh. I don't know if you can see that or not, but whatever that stuff is seems to be coming loose. It's almost like ash. Oh, you know what? I bet somebody tried to... I bet that's what it is. Somebody tried to pipe mud this. Probably after it started to show through on the outside, and that would not have been successful. But yeah, I think that's actually... yeah, so there's sort of a... Let's see if we can get this. So you see that light colored area? That's the burnout. And then the very light colored area at the lower part of the screen, that's my hand showing through where it's actually burned through. But there's a large section there that's going to need to be removed and replaced. Okay, so what I'm going to do off screen then is I'm going to quickly clean this because I'm going to strip it. So I'll quickly clean it with some oil soap, and then I will go ahead and get the acetone out and strip the finish off of it, and some if not all of the stain. And then we're going to come back and start to figure out how we're going to enlarge this and this hole and what we're going to need to do for that. So I will bring you back very soon. So that was thoroughly unsuccessful. So I wiped this down with acetone in an attempt to break the wax and start to remove the finish. And I did it twice. It did nothing. I took it to the buffing wheel and did a coarse buff on it to hopefully break the surface, then hit it with some more acetone. Nothing. So this seems to have some sort of a finish on it that for whatever reason is not reacting to acetone, which is odd. I don't know what it is, but we'll figure that out later. I'm not too concerned about it. If worse comes to worse, we'll just have to do a lot of sanding to break that off before we refinish it, but that's okay. So the next order of business is to widen this out and to figure out just how much of this we have to take away. Now I did some poking around in there off camera with where is it? This little dental probe. These things are great. You can get them at Harbor Freight, and if you're doing pipe repair, you really should get a pack of these because they come in handy in all sorts of ways. So you can see the hole down there, and below it there is a white area. That white area is definitely thinned out briar. It's briar that has burned, but it has not burned through. And I don't think we're going to have to cut out that entire section, but we are going to have to remove some of it around the actual hole. Now, there's a couple different ways we could do this. I could just get a drill bit and just drill a nice straight hole, and the benefit of that is then I could just turn a piece of briar to exactly that diameter and fit it in. But really, that's not likely the best option because we want to have some irregularity to it to help the fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use some files to widen this out, and I may wind up going back on this. I might change the approach. It varies from pipe to pipe, but I'm going to basically go in there with these files. This one is too big, so I'm going to have to get something a little bit smaller to start. I don't have the round version of this available right now, but you'll get the idea. I'm just going to go in there and start to work my way around this. Maybe I could just break it out a bit. Just break it out a bit with the edges here. My apologies for the dog barking. I'm sure there's something very important. There we go. So now we can start to kind of work that in. And all I'm trying to do is sort of widen that out somewhat evenly. And we'll keep doing that until we're satisfied that we've got nice raw briar all around the inside of that. And I'll bring you back when that's done and when the dog is quiet. Alright, we're back, and look at that. It's a much bigger hole. So what I did was I began, just to quickly recap, I used this triangular file just to get the hole a little bit bigger so that I could start to use these chainsaw files, and I only use the very end of these because there's not a lot of room in there. But I used 3 different size chainsaw files, which worked very well and got me to the point where I could use this, what is called a rat tail file. So this has a slight taper to it, and that's very good because now I have a hole here that is slightly tapered. So you can see that goes into right about there. So what that means is this side of the hole is bigger than the inside of the hole. So I can make sort of a cork-shaped, or I don't know, truncated cone plug that'll go in there and will seal very nicely. And we'll hopefully have a little of a gap, which will make it look better. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use that. So this is a chunk of scrap briar. Now I want to think a little bit about the grain direction on this and try not to be too crazy with it, too off from the directions that it should be going. Although I don't think briar moves that much, so it's really not going to be that much of a problem. But I think based on the way the grain is running here, we've got major grain direction here, which would mean any ring grain would be going that way. We got ring grain here, so yeah, probably looking at something from this. either one really, or even the point here would be appropriate. So as long as I'm not cutting it this way, if I cut it somewhere along here, I should be okay. So I'm going to cut a slab of this, and then I'll cut a rectangular shape out, put it on the lathe, and start to turn it until it just starts to fit in there, and then we'll do some hand shaping to get it to fit in perfectly. So I will bring you back when I'm ready to do the hand shape. Alright, so what I wound up doing was I cut a roughly 1/2 inch slice off that block of briar, and then I cut a 1/2 inch slice off the end of that, giving me a piece that was roughly square. Chuck that in the lathe and turn down a section here at the end that is close but not yet perfectly fitting into that hole that we made. So the next step is going to be to begin to shape that. We're going to use some files and sandpaper and just sort of sneak up on the fit here. We'll initially get it so that it's just fitting in, and then we're going to start to angle the file a little bit to try to taper it and create a nice plug that'll extend into the bowl here. I want it to actually pass through a fair amount, and I can go in there later with a Dremel and even that out. But for now, I want to make sure that we've got something that's seating in there nicely. So that's going to be a lot of boring work with files and sandpaper. I will do that, and I will bring you back when we have the plug nicely fit. And we are back. So what I've done is I basically used a couple of these small hand files. These are just cheap, but not bad quality files. And I was able to shape the end of that to fit pretty snugly inside the hole. Now I'll show you what it looks like down there. You can see it's sticking in there, and it's actually protruding just about 1 millimeter beyond the edge, so I can feel it in there, but it's not coming up above the rest of that burnout that's down there, because that whole thing is going to get filled in with some of my pipe mortar. So this is exactly how I wanted it to be. I'm going to still grind in there a bit with a Dremel, and I'll rough everything up so that the pipe mortar sticks really well. But this way I don't have to worry about grinding anything flush or anything like that. I can just pipe mortar over it. The outside, so you can see I'm shining the light around the outside of the plug, and it is completely light tight. So I'm just kind of trying to shine in there, and it is light tight. So the way I established that was I would kind of get it to fit, and I'd push it in, and then I'd look for where there were light spots coming through, and wherever there weren't light spots coming through, that's where I would file. And I just kept doing that, and slowly but surely it fit in there. So it's going in, you know, just far enough. It goes in about that far. See where my thumbnail is there, and does form a nice tight plug. But I think there's plenty of space around it and irregularities that we're going to be able to get an epoxy to grab onto that nicely. So I'm going to epoxy it, and I'm going to use just standard, what is this stuff here? This is Ace Hardware 8 to 10 minute epoxy, and that should be fine for this. It's not, I worry about the epoxy that I use whenever the joint is going to be under stress. This is not going to be under stress ever. We're going to, you know, file it off flush, and you're never going to be pushing on that or anything, so it will be quite fine. I'm going to leave this attached and use it as a handle so that I don't have to fiddle around with a tiny little piece of briar, and then we'll come back and we'll saw this off and use files and sandpaper to shape it, and then probably use a Dremel tool, maybe some smaller files to start to contour and try to blend it in with the sandblast there. Now that may or may not work, so we might wind up having to rusticate the whole thing. We'll just have to see how it turns out. But for now, we're in pretty good shape, all things considered. So I will go ahead and do the epoxy. You've seen people epoxy things before, so there's no need to do that on screen. Let this set. I know it's 8 to 10 minutes, but I like to let the epoxy cure overnight. And I'll bring you back in the next installment when we'll be ready to start cutting this off and shaping it and moving on with the next phase of the restoration. So I thank you all for watching. Please feel free to comment or ask questions. I always enjoy when I get those. And until we speak again, I will look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Goodbye now.